what I came across is I have idols like Kobe Bryant, right, from plays basketball, and there was like this thing called the Mamba Mentality, and if you guys don't know Kobe Bryant, then you've been living under a rock. But basically, one of the best basketball players of all time, and when he was in a game and it was like fourth quarter, you get him the ball because he would find a way to score, and his whole personality would change. He's like, I'm going to win this game, right?
Welcome everybody back to another exciting show of the About That Water podcast, where we help you build strong financial habits, but also help you build that confidence in spending your money, getting money, and also talking about your money. But today we got an awesome opportunity to talk to somebody who has been around the block a couple times, not like J-Lo, but has been in the advertising space for quite some time. Brandon Birkmeyer. How you doing today, sir?
Good, man. I don't know how you keep the straight face while doing like the podcast voices and making jokes about me, but I think this is gonna be a funny episode. We're gonna enjoy ourselves. I'm rolling with it. This is gonna be good. I didn't put on my, hey, this is my Brandon podcast voice, but we can roll with it, man. We're gonna have fun.
Yeah, this is gonna be great, because one of the things that I would like to talk about with the exciting things that you've been doing, and one of the things that people have an issue with is talking about not just branding as a business, but I want to talk this to everybody and making this about themselves as far as their personal brand. And you came up with this awesome book called Front and Center Leadership: How Leaders Use Personal Branding to Stand Out, and How You Can Too. So if you guys haven't got the chance to check it out before you actually listen to the show, I highly recommend to go down and get yourself a copy, Amazon right now. So Brandon, you came up with this cool book. Why would you do such a thing, Brandon? It's not an easy task to write a book. For me, there's two reasons. There's like business reasons, and then there's like heart reasons, right? From like the motivational heart standpoint, like I wanted to write something that would have served me when I was coming up. And if to those of you that don't know me, like I worked in corporate for 17 years at advertising agencies, and that was a career path that I was on, and I hit some ceilings along the way. And if I knew then what I knew now, I would have invested in some more personal development, especially in these categories that I put into this personal branding category. Things like building some more authority in my industry, or building influence amongst a network of people and building better relationships in my industry, or building more credibility in the work that I was doing. So that realization was, the motivation for the book. It's like, how do I write that what would have helped me situation that I could give back to people that are still in corporate, whether they're getting started or they've been doing it 10 years, they're managers, they're rising managers, they're directors, they're VPs. How do we help them invest in the skills? Not that once you're a leader, how do you be a better leader? It does have the word leadership in the title, but really the skills of how do you get recognized for the work you're already doing, so that you have the opportunity to be promoted into a leadership position. Because I think that's what really the problem is. I think a lot of us have skills that are leadership skills, but we're not getting noticed. We're not standing out. We're not stepping up to it in a point and in a way where people are saying, that's the one. Let's give them a shot. So from your experience in doing this for well over 20 something years, do you feel that leaders are born, or can they be created?
Yeah, I mean, I think that there's definitely natural tendencies to take charge and to be more aggressive. Leadership is really just like, it just means to lead, right? Leading literally just means to be in front. Like there are line leaders at school, right? My kid's school, he's 7 years old. It's like the person literally in the front of the line. And what does that take? It takes courage, right? It takes, like, you are the person who is willing to go first into something. And yeah, I think that is a natural skill, but I think a lot of us are actually more naturally reluctant to do that. And I think that's a safety thing, right? We have this, what I call like a middle of the pack mentality, where you get it, where we'd rather, like animals, like we jump into the herd. We'd rather be in the middle so we're not picked off by the wolves, right? Mm-hmm.
And that happens in real life. Like if you are in an organization like I was, there's a team of people, there's leaders at your level. And, when they're like, hey, there's this new project, you don't always want to raise your hand because it probably means more hours without the reward. Typically, you're not getting paid more to do the extra project. And if you do something wrong, like the spotlight's on you. Right. So I get that there's a natural tendency to not want to be stepping out. But I think that also puts us in a place where we're not getting noticed. So my question is, that this book tries to answer is, well, what do you do? Like, how do you step out? When do you step out? And how do you take those steps so that when the spotlight's on you, you're prepared for that?
All right. So I want to get into that just a little bit, because one of the things that because I love leadership. That's kind of like my bread and butter. I love it. But one of the things that have come to me when it comes to leadership, that the question always come to is, what is a great leader? Like, what are those attributes that makes a great leader? Because before we start diving into the book, I just want to kind of get your thoughts on it before we dive into that process.
Yeah. What's funny is I think that there are definitely better books to read if you're like, these are the leadership skills that I want to develop, like building teams and, whatever the other things are, other qualities, other attributes. But to not duck the question, in my experience from, I've been around leaders, I've been a leader, I've worked with leaders. For me, there are two basic things that I like to combine, and it's what is leadership? And for me, it's that you're literally willing to take some initiative. You are willing to be the person who raises their hand and says, I'm going to take this responsibility. You are willing to take ownership. You're willing to take accountability, which takes a little bit of courage, like we were talking about. That is the really only criteria to be a leader. Now, to make it good, right? To make it good is how you then handle that situation. And that, that can deal with a lot of things. Like that's everything from the people that you're leading to the situation you're handling and all the in between, for me. And I've experienced good leaders and bad leaders. And typically for me, the good leaders are the ones who not only know where we're going, right? They have that vision and they have that sense of direction because they're leading. But they also know how to bring people along, set good examples, and motivate us to want to follow. And that's a relationship. I think leadership's a relationship, right? Between the person in the front and everyone who has agreed to come on that journey.
And so that ties into this reason why I asked you that question, because I figured I know what you were going to go. This is I'm leading this conversation as the podcast host. And when it comes to that, you're supposed to be able to have, the full understanding of where this conversation can go, but also be, I guess you could say, resilient to anything that's coming up, and how that you can actually transition or move along and navigate so that it doesn't impact the mission for the team. That's fair enough?
Yeah, I think that's great. I mean, I would consider myself, like looking back, I was happy to be a follower, and I think that there's good followers too. And I'm like, I always aspired to be great number two, right? Like the person who you're like, I want that person on my team. They make my life easier. They get it. They have good energy. So I was like, that was a great goal too. And but I put myself in that box, which also limited me from volunteering for those other roles as well. So yeah, I think that I think we've generally defined it well together. Where do you want to lead us next?
Right. Well, I want to lead us down Middle Earth, like that. So you were talking about that middle pack mentality. You have this in chapter 3, and I thought that was actually interesting, of understanding where do we want to fit in inside the corporate. And you already touched on it a little bit, but when it comes to leadership, and being in that middle, how do we stand out? And this is where the personal brand kind of steps in. It's like, yeah, I'm in the middle, but I feel like I can do more. This leader is kind of seeing like, I can see that they tapped out or ready to move on, because usually the good leaders usually move on. How do you go from the middle of the pack to the front of the pack with your personal brand?
Yeah, absolutely. And
The personal branding we can discuss it at length, because there's a whole framework for all the things you can do to be investing in yourself and growing and developing. Because to me, that's a journey, right? This isn't a like one golden bullet solution to all your problems. Like I'm still on the path of building my personal brand. Like launching a book, that's a step on this long journey, right? Every relationship, every conversation is a step on the journey. But to answer your question, when I had to think about like what separates people who stay in the middle from the people who venture outward, and there was this kind of yin and yang that I looked at, and the first was that the people who overcome it tend to be the ones who understand how to take initiative. And it doesn't have to be all the time, but at those critical moments where there's something to decide that could affect your future, you took the initiative to do something. And it could be anything, and we have a lot of examples, but like I think that concept of taking initiative, we all understand it, but like, what does that mean really? And I think it's easy to understand. You look at the opposite of that, which is the reluctance we have. I think there's a lot of reluctant leaders out there, people who, like we talked about, have legitimate reasons for not necessarily wanting to raise their hand and put themselves out there. And I think that reluctance, there's three types of it. Actually, it's not just that type. That first type I call classic reluctance. You have a good reason. You're like, I've seen things that I choose not to do. Like it could be as simple as making a decision to go to dinner. You're like, I don't want to go to that restaurant. I don't like it. I'm not in the mood for it. I'm not hungry. Like you might have good reasons, right? Mm-hmm. Cool. You're reluctant for good reason. That's classic reluctance. The second type of reluctance I call thoughtful indecision. And this is where this is me. I'm guilty of this a lot, which is you tend to overthink things, not in a bad way, but you like to have your pros and cons list. You like to analyze, you like to have all the data. And that thoughtful indecision means that you are delaying making a decision because you are trying to look deeper into it. And for some decisions, that's great. For others, you are slowing yourself down and maybe someone's passing you by. Right. And then the third type of reluctance, really, I call agreeableness. And this is like the consensus building, right? It's really healthy in a lot of situations, but in other situations, figuring out between 4, 5, 6 people, what does everyone want to do, and get everyone's opinion and then take a vote. Typically, if that's always happening, you may never get your opinion and get your way in that vote. Right. So at some points in your career, in your life, there might be points where you shouldn't be agreeable, where you should voice what you really want and try to pursue that and fill your cup first, right? So I think of it like that. I think if you can figure out that there's moments like that in your life and be aware of that, it might be easier to decide, when do I want to take a little bit of risk and put myself out there and take some initiative. And I think if you have that mindset that I'm going to be looking for those opportunities, then they'll present themselves.
Yeah, because it brings up your repetition at that point. As far as like, not repetition, your reputation. And having your reputation, like as you notice, I've been going through your book a little bit.
I love it. Let's do it.
So, because once you figure out that like, hey, this is where I stand, and most people would rather have a leader say like, yes, this is where I want to go, make a decision and stick with it. Even if it's the wrong decision, people would rather that you say like, hey, this is where I want to go. Even if you don't even say why, sometimes they just like happy that you said something. And if you don't have a reputation of just sticking to something, that could be really bad on the team and even on you. So building a good reputation, is that a benefit or not?
I think that's kind of a leading question, right? I mean, no one's going to say having a bad reputation is a great plan. But let me start with this, right? I think going into this, if you're actively thinking about your reputation, like you're intentionally thinking, what can I do about this? That is what personal branding is to me. It's taking that reputation and being intentional about it. And so what does that start with? For me, you have to figure out, what are your motivations? What are your goals? Like that's the starting point. And when you have a goal, when you have something you're shooting for, then the steps to get there, the milestones along the way, can become more obvious. You can set things that say, okay, well, if here's what I want to go, like, what are other people doing that have gotten there? What are skills that they have that I don't have? And you can do a bit of an audit, right? And say, okay, here's the plan. So for me, like, I'm still building my personal brand. And for me, I was like, I want to do more speaking on stages, right? That is one extra dynamic piece of my puzzle. You know, I do a lot of coaching and consulting, and I'm out there and I do podcasting, YouTube, but speaking is something I did a little bit of, but I want to do more of. So I'm like, let me get good at this. I identified that as a goal. And once that happened, it's suddenly very obvious to me. I was like, let me look at what other speakers are doing and who they are. Oh, they all joined this club called the National Speakers Association. Let me join that club. And then I got around speakers and they had like a class. I'm like, let me take that class. And in the class, they had mentors. I'm like, well, let me get a mentor. And then I talked to the mentor. He's like, you should probably write a book. So like, these things start to unravel when you have a goal. But if I hadn't set down that path and said, this is what I want to do next. This is my next project, which I love thinking in terms of projects. It just makes things a lot easier. Like I have a small goal to get towards. When you have that goal, suddenly the path becomes much clearer in terms of building that reputation. And yeah, I think it is valuable because don't you want to achieve like whatever you want to achieve? That's going to happen when you have a plan. And yeah, so I think a reputation in general, to really answer your question, I think the value of it is all the things along the way. You are saying, hey, look at the things that matter. Like you're in charge of that. Otherwise, like for example, because I want to make this a lot easier, because I feel like I've talked in a lot of circles here. Let's be honest. If you're in a room, right? And some of you probably heard this analogy, but I'm going to twist it for you. If you're in a room and people are, a bunch of people are in the room and people are talking about you, right? They say your personal brand, your reputation is what people say about you, right? In that room when you're not in the room or whatever, they can't hear you.
Yeah.
And for me, if they're talking about you, like your attitude, your physical appearance, that's gossip. That's not reputation to me. It can determine your reputation, but it's gossip. What I'd rather people be talking about is your ideas, is what you stand for, is your perspective, is something that you did that influenced them. And those are the things that I think make reputation valuable. When you are creating the thing that then people look at, right? Because it's two sides of a coin. It's what you put out there into the world, and it's in that world interpreting it. And that piece in the middle is a reputation. And yeah, it's valuable because you get to decide how people see you, how you show up every day, and what you're putting out into the world.
So what is your like pain point, or that you wish that most brands do more of, or people do more of with their personal brands?
So, I mean, for me, that's up to them, right? Like what they want to do with the personal brand is up to them. If they just don't take advantage of it, that's great. Maybe you're not motivated. Maybe you're happy, you're safe, you're comfortable on your couch, you've got a paycheck. Great. Honestly, I was that person for a long time. I loved certainty in my life. I love the idea that like I know where my money's coming from, and that's fine. But what I realized is that sometimes when you need it and you don't have it, you're in trouble, right? Like I see these open for work, symbols on LinkedIn all the time. And, and people I know and like I'm fans of in the industry. And suddenly it's like, oh, it's been a year. I still don't have a job. And Brandon, help me. Like maybe this personal branding thing will help me. And I'm like, yeah, it will, but this is a long game. Like this is, what could you have done 10 years ago that would have helped you now? That's the bigger question. So right now it's like, you just need to hunt, right? You need to get out there, pound the pavement, talk to the right people, get chances, but dig the well before you're thirsty, right? So right now, if you have a job, I wish when I had a job, someone shook me and was like, yo, you could be doing more. Like, it's cool to feel safe, but one day you won't. And you'll wish you will have built a bigger network, that you will have put yourself out there and shared your perspectives and developed a point of view and all these things that when you needed a job, like it wasn't even a question. People were waiting to hire you. People were waiting to support you and be on your team. So I think that is kind of where this goes for me. And I think that's what I hope for people, is that when they need it, they already have it. It's already there.
Yeah. And one of the things, because you did mention that you really wrote this book for your younger self. It's something that you kind of wish you had this book doing your younger self. But where were you, or where were you seeing yourself as a younger self? Or like younger self, like, hey, I worked at McDonald's, younger self, or younger self, like, hey, I got my first corporate job, younger self?
Yeah, I mean, I think the skills work at any age, but to be realistic, I think for when I was talking about me, it was my younger self when I was starting in my career, and I never changed. People change careers and things, and that's great. But I think if I had gotten started, I could have started these little things like taking on personal development projects, like taking a class, taking a course, whatever it might be, getting curious about things, reading some books, whatever it might be. It's just general personal development. I think we all should be doing a little bit more of it. So I'm talking to that person really. And where I was when I was coming up, I was just, doing the job, getting the paycheck. And what changed for me is I realized once I got further along in my career, I hit ceilings, right? Where it was like the job wasn't my promotion wasn't up to me. It was a waiting game, and someone else got to determine if I got promoted or not,
Yeah.
and that, let's be honest, as humans, our work is commoditized these days. Like most of our jobs, they want to make plug and play so that you can, if this doesn't work out, they can just put someone else into that spot. So I was hitting those ceilings, and that's fine. But I was also seeing my bosses and my boss's bosses starting to become unemployed. And that's just because there's lesser and lesser jobs at the top of these organizations. And I was like, man, well, that means this certainty that I have that I'm on this career path and I'm safe, that I can sit on the couch and collect the check and go to my 9 to 5 and do work. It's actually not safe anymore because I'm going to hit their age in 5 years and also have less opportunities. And if I'm unemployed, I might be unemployed for a year because there's less jobs or whatever it is. So that fear of the unknown, and the reason, I was playing it safe, that fear,
I call it of Frozen, the fear of the unknown.
Yeah, into the unknown. Absolutely. Well, put it this way. I think like the fear that was like behind me, which is like just keep it safe, stay on the straight and narrow, was strong enough that I chased certainty. But then I had now a fear in front of me, which was this could be you in 5 years. So you've got to choose. Like, how do you want this to go? And so I realized, like, if you want to be in charge of it, you've got to take control and start investing in, not just your resume, but your reputation.
Yeah. And so we talked about the reputation a little bit, but you also had 3 pillars for businesses. Because I want to do a shift from personal for the people who actually have businesses or actually working a 9 to 5 and still doing the business. You mentioned something back in 2022. Yes, I did my research. Talking about the 3 pillars, and you're talking about grabbing attention that people do well. They build the community, which they kind of shaky there, but impact. You mentioned that a lot of businesses fail at that spot. Why is that? Why do you think that is?
Yeah, and that's in the book too. It's the framework of personal branding. It's the same framework that I learned marketing businesses. I think that there's 3 pieces to this all, and I do call them creating content, which is what I think creates authority. Creating content, making an impact, and building community. Those are the 3 things in any really order. It doesn't really matter. And the community part is what I just talked about as influence. But the impact part, like, what does that even mean? For me, there's you, and then there's the people around you, right? There's you and there's the audience, there's you and there's your customers. And in between those 2 things is the value that is created. So how are you as a business owner, if that's where you wanted to take this, right? How are you as a business owner creating value for your customers, right? If you don't do that, you don't have a business. And then there's an exchange of value. You provide a service, they provide a fee or whatever it is. So I think that model is something that we can think about as in our daily lives. And whether you're running a personal brand business, whether you're working in corporate, it's how am I creating value for the key stakeholders in my life? And that's what I call making an impact. And it doesn't have to, I know it sounds kind of purposeful and foo-foo, but that's not what I mean. I mean, literally, how are you creating value? And so I think that when I think about that, I make it sound like, oh, you just solve their problem, right? It's actually much more, I think, more complicated than that, or when everyone would do it. For me, I think you have to start with smaller bites. You have to think about what are small things I can do? What are some quick wins I can get for the stakeholders in my life? How do I help? And
with that, you start to develop skills and resources to help people. So when I was getting started in entrepreneurship, it was, well, I have these marketing skills. So when I help people, I'm like, let me talk to them about their websites. Let me talk to them about email marketing. Let me talk to them about Facebook ads. Let's talk to them about social media management, because I knew some of those things. And so it's like, they are, skilled at their business and I'm skilled at marketing. We'll combine these things and we'll see if I can help their business. And but if you're in corporate, they're like, how do I help? Well, it's like, there are things you do every day that you can do, quick wins for your team, quick wins for the client that you're working for, developing resources that you can share, coming up with processes, being, things that you can do to make things more productive. There's little quick wins. And that's the key, is that they have to be small enough that people can implement them and find the advantage of them right away. And then you can go ahead.
Oh, no, because you got me thinking about the 1% increase. And I forgot who coined that term or whatever, but it was this guy, just to share a story right quick. It was a guy that was trying to get his cycling team to actually win championships. They were just kind of the bottom of the barrel. And one of the things that they did was just kind of focus on that 1% of like, so the coach was like, hey, how about everybody just bring your pillows from home when we go to travel? And just because they brought their pillows from home, because they were actually able to get better rest, they were able to then increase their speed a little bit better, and they performed a little bit better. So then as a team and as a collective, they all look for that little extra 1% gain so that they can be better the next time they go out to play. So that's what got me to remember of, like, when you talk about impact, how can you do that small bite, that 1% change that could actually change their lives?
I love that. Absolutely. And what's funny is, for me, I wanted to frame that. I love that story. And I think I was witnessing similar things. And I was like, where did I put that in the books? I think these are important. And what I came across is, I have idols like Kobe Bryant, right? He plays basketball. And there was like this thing called the Mamba Mentality. And if you guys don't know Kobe Bryant, then you've been living under a rock. But basically, one of the best basketball players of all time. And when he was in a game and it was like fourth quarter, you get him the ball, because he would find a way to score, and his whole personality would change. He's like, I'm going to win this game. Right? The determination there was crazy. And how did he turn that on? Like, how did he get to that? How did he get to that place where he could turn that on? And it was really through practice, right? Putting in the reps so that every day, when you're actually called into the spotlight, you've done the reps, you've done the work to get there. He had that mentality. And what's funny is, I looked into that. I was like, I think, to get to that point, you have to have that kind of mentality and determination like that he had. You also have to have the right type of practice to get better at something. And what's been proven in research is, like, for example, people were asked to memorize a set of numbers, right? How many numbers can you memorize? The average was like 7 to like 9 or 10 numbers, consistently. Right. And they were trying to push people, and they could maybe get 1 or 2 more. And then they were hitting this wall every time, hundreds of people. And then they changed the way that they practiced the numbers. They changed it so that they'd say, okay, if you get to 9 digits or 10 digits, we're going to just try to get 1 more number than that, and we're going to stop. And then we're going to try to get 1 more number than that, and we're going to stop. And so people were, and then if you don't get it, we're going to go 1 back, and then we're going to keep going. So it was this small increment of like just trying to get 1 number higher, that actually helped people like completely break the records in terms of how many numbers they could remember. And the reason I'm telling you this is, there are certain things you can do that change how you perform, that change how you show up, and the amount of how far you can get in some of the things you take on. So I think that you need methods, you need the right determination and skills, and you have to be motivated towards some kind of goal in general.
Yeah, definitely. You and I, we met at Podcast Movement Evolutions. Then we met up again at Podcast Movement. And one of the things that I have to say with you, you almost pretty much just like adopted me. It was like, hey, I know this guy. I'm stuck with this guy. You come along with all the stuff. Where the drink's at? I was like, cool. I like the drink too.
That sums it up.
Right. And one of the things that you also have in the book here, and And I do appreciate that you had it in there, which is networking. Because networking is very important when it comes to either going to conferences or if you even go to work, to a new job. Everybody has to start new. How do you network? What do you look for when you go to different events? Obviously, you got to have a different theme for each event or each environment that you go into. But from a business perspective, because like you say, you went to the NSA, the National Speakers Association, and you went in there to network. So what did you do to kind of set yourself up, to set yourself apart, and then also add value to that community?
Yeah, that's a good question. I'll tell you this: I didn't go there to network. I went there to participate, and it's semantics, right?
Yeah.
I went there to participate, and I think that I had to carefully choose my words when I was thinking, how do I want to teach other people about these things that I think are really important concepts? And I called it. I look for purposeful places to participate, and the alliteration helps, right? But in other words, it's a place that I have a reason to be there, and it has somewhere where I can engage other people in a way where we're building community, we're learning from each other, we're getting to know each other, right? It's a relationship building, right? Which is networking, obviously. But when I go into it with that mentality, I choose places based on, do we have some kind of common ground? Like I go to podcast conferences. I really don't have a lot of customers at podcast conferences. That's not why I would go to there. I go to podcast conferences because I'm a podcaster. And so I meet other people who we have this common ground. I get better at my craft, which is always, I think, a great way to choose a place to go participate is figuring out something you want to get better at and checking it out. And while I'm there, I meet people that I like, and I'm like, okay, cool. You seem fun. I want to hang out with you.
That's what happened.
And maybe that's just me, but I found that it's way easier to kind of go get through these kind of things if I just find people that I'm like, I think I'm going to like you, and I just choose to like them. And I was like, I'm going to like you whether you like me or not. And usually along the way we'll find some common ground and things that we like. And guess what? It's just for one like meeting or one conference, and you may never see that person again. We don't have to pick up, where we left off. But most of the time, if you have a good experience and you do have some things in common, then you set the stage for potentially hanging out with that person again, seeing them again, following up, having a conversation. And who knows, like as you get to know each other, that relationship can turn into anything. That relationship can turn into a partnership, a business referral, a client, or just a friend that like cheers you on or, provides you some accountability or some support along the way. Who knows? And then vice versa. So yeah, I go into it thinking like, who can I hang out with? Because guys, it's really lonely when you don't got people that you can like keep going back to and hang out with. So especially like that first day at a conference with brand new people, you don't know anybody. It's the worst day for me and for anybody else until I can like find a way to meet a couple people who I'm like, we seem to have similar energy and some things in common. Okay, I can breathe and find a jump off point. And there's this book. I mean, I did a lot of research because it was my weakest point, was this kind of networking thing. So I was like reading books and listening. I listened to podcasts like the Build Your Network podcast, the Art of Charm podcast back in the day, and like Introverted Extrovert, like all these other podcasts. And then I would read books, and one of the How to Make Friends and Influence People by was it Dale Carnegie?
Yeah, that's one of Covey's or something.
Yeah, and then recently, like Vanessa Van Edwards has a book, and it's all about like figuring out how people interact and kind of affect one another, and like learning those skills again, like anything else. I found something I was like, I'd love to get better at this. And so I just start to like, once I've decided that, it just makes it a lot easier. And so, yeah, I love networking and meeting people, as I call it, purposeful places to participate. And then I that's like level one, if you will. Like that's the first thing we should all be doing more of. And a lot of us are guilty of just avoiding it. And then when you start doing it more, you actually your mindset changes. You're like, okay, I got a habit for this. Now I want to think about like, who can I partner with? Like, who are people that I'd love to do some things with long term? Like we're doing a podcast now, right? We've met each other twice, and now we're twice. Creating content together. But like, who can I partner with? Who can I like do things with in the future? And I start thinking with that, and I'm like, how can I help Anthony? Right? What can I do for him?
And then beyond that, eventually I'm like, how do I now show up to these places that I'm participating? How do I show up at them as a leader? Right. For the NSA, like my local chapter, and then I've been there and I've gotten to know people. I want to be on the board. I want to participate in the running of our chapter so that I can be a part of that team. When I go to a conference, I want to speak at the conference. I want to run trainings at the conference. I want to participate in a more elevated way. And that, I think, that's how these things progress from not being just networking. They move beyond relationships to things that actually really catapult you and your momentum into the future.
Oh, man. Well, since you talk about the future, third segment of the show is talking about the futures. Like I said, we're going to work this out, man. But also, I mean, I have to say, I actually was taking notes while you were talking about that, because one of the things I love that you did the 3 Ps, which is purposeful places to participate. Because I was actually thinking about that this year. It's like, I'm going to try all the podcasty stuff, because that's one of the things I've been lacking is the podcast community. I've been mostly focusing on the financial community. So I'm always talking to them, getting to know them, seeing what they're doing for the community, for, you know, the education department, all the way through to teaching kids and helping parents teach their kids about finances and stuff like that. So going from seeing that financial piece to now going to the broader aspect, which is the baseline of communication, which is the podcasting side, I have to say that I love this environment. Just to say, it's like this environment has really opened up my eyes to say, like, hey, podcasting can go and take you so many different places. Like you say, you want to be a speaker. Well, technically, you're getting your practice now on your podcast and being a guest on other podcasts. Then, not only that, when you come to partnering, you're not only partnering or building those relationships. Say if I have a conference and I was like, hey, Brandon, I know you live in this area. Dude, somebody about to pay me $1,000. I'll give you like a couple $100 if you can do an opening session before I come out. Are you okay with that? You'd be like, bro, sure, I got you. And then we can build that connection. And then you're on your whole path because I gave you a shot on my coattails for that one, or vice versa. And then we can show up as a leader. Now we already showcase what we can do. And now we can actually take that to a whole nother level. Did I do it justice?
You did great. What are you apologizing for? This is great. Okay. No, I like reiterating it. I mean, everyone thinks about things slightly differently. But you know, I've enjoyed a relationship, and like to your point, like because of our hanging out at this environment, you introduced me to the person that runs another conference. I've never been to FinCon, and I'm probably going to check that out and see you and hang out with people that you know there. And I wouldn't have really decided to go there probably unless I, had that extra push that you're going to be there. So this is expanding my world too. And when we were both together meeting new people at this last conference, we got to meet the podcast host of the Bigger Pockets Money podcast. That's a massive
that was
podcast.
Amazing. Yes.
Right. And we're all exchanging stories. I'm talking you up, you're talking me up. And this person's like, well, you guys sound cool. Like it's like the rising tide lifts all ships, and it's great.
Yeah. So when it comes to the futures, this is mostly about you. What skills or habits do you feel is going to take you to that next level?
So yeah, right now, I think the biggest thing for me, I am working on 2 skills. One is like speech writing and stagecraft, because I want, like, whenever I take something on, I want to be good at it. Right. Yes, I have the reps from podcasting, but you have to change it. You have to adapt it for the new environment. So I'm studying the stagecraft and the speech writing to get better at creating a message delivered in an impactful way. Right. I know what I want to talk about, but how do I share it in a way that people are like, oh, that was great. Right. So I'm studying that. I want to get better at that. And then the others is like, I'd like to get better at just the general art of sales and persuasion, mainly because it's something I've avoided for so long. Because it makes me feel scummy to sell things. And I know that that's a wrong mentality, and that there's better mindsets around it. And I want to tackle that. So yeah, those are the 2 things that are like on my agenda, if you will.
Awesome. Is there anything you want to leave the audience with before we dive into the final 4?
Yeah, I would say this. I'll leave it with a fun fact, right? That may motivate people to me take a little bit of ownership of their investment in themselves, and that is a lot of us are a little bit on autopilot. We have routines. There's a statistic that's from Gerard Roth. He's a PhD in philosophy and biology out of the University of Bremen. And he studied this and found this to be true. Over 80% of our actions take place automatically without us having to even think about it. Our brains strive to turn everything into a routine. Why? Because thinking is time consuming, right? Routines help our brains conserve energy and minimize risk. And that's exactly what I'm talking about with the things that like, what is the problem? Well, we are built to figure out like, how do I just make this something automatic that I don't have to think about? So I'm like, if I can motivate you to say, what is something that I'm doing routinely that maybe I should take out of the routine and do something a little different, and put that awareness that maybe those routines aren't helping me in certain, not in every, you don't have to think about everything, but in certain regards, maybe there's something you should break the routine of this time around.
Awesome. All right. You ready for the final 4 questions?
Let's do it.
All right. Question number 1. What does wealth mean to you?
That's a good one. Well, wealth, what does wealth mean to me? So for me, it makes me think of the word abundance, and which is really more of a mindset than like a tangible thing. And, you know, like what makes you feel wealthy. So for me, I would say when I feel like my time is my own, that I am in control of how I, you know, bring in that security to my family that I like, because it's a strong value for me is being certain and secure. When I'm in control of those things, I have lifestyle freedom, I have financial freedom. That's when I feel wealthy. And when I don't have to do it at the sacrifice of my values. So that's how I would define it.
All right. Number 2, what was your worst money mistake?
So rude of you to ask that. So rude.
Well, buy me a beer. Like.
Yeah. No, you know what? I'll say this. When I was younger, I definitely got into some credit card debt, and you know, it ballooned quickly. And this was just, you know, I was young and just kind of doing whatever. And for the audience that hasn't, you know, ever gotten into trouble, close your ears. But you know, I had a couple DUIs in my younger 20s, and it's driving under the influence, right? And these aren't like, I wasn't crazy, you know, whatever. You know, a couple beers, you get pulled over. It was just, it was what it was. And not that I'm advocating for that. It's a terrible thing. It happened. But and this is in California where the laws are very strict. But for the first one, your out-of-pocket expense is probably in the range of $5,000 to $7,000 between lawyers and fees and whatever else you have to do, and your time and the community service and whatever else, right? So just because this is about that wallet, that was the first one. But the second one, right, which was, you know, a couple years later, and again, it doesn't matter the circumstances. No one got hurt or anything like that. No, there's no accident. The second one really scared me straight. And I'll tell you this, it was probably between $20,000 and $25,000 worth of fines and things like that. So it adds up very quickly. And so that is just for just making a stupid decision, there are consequences, not to mention all the other things, you know, that in terms of the penalties and the time that you waste, and losing driver's licenses and things like that. So if, you know, for people who like, I would say if this can be a PSA for just, hey, just get an Uber. We have no excuses anymore. Like, we didn't have Ubers back then. This was just taxi cabs, right? It's not worth it. Like, Justin Timberlake just got a DUI or whatever it was, I think, right? It's just like, it's not worth it. Like, find some other way, because if you can save yourself tens of thousands of dollars, it's probably a better choice.
Right. Well, that's your sales tactic right there. I mean, hey, you don't want to get a DUI? Just get an Uber.
Just get an Uber, straight up.
All right. Number 3, what is your favorite financial or non-financial book?
My favorite book, financial or non-financial.
which I guess, why isn't it just your favorite book? Because
Yeah, pretty much it.
Yeah. Besides mine, which is amazing, obviously, Front and Center Leadership, check it out, brandonbirkmeyer.com/books. Besides that, yeah, you got to. I have a lot of them, to be honest, but the one that I talk about a lot of the time is this book called Flip the Script. And it is kind of about, it is a little bit about sales, but it's actually about the opposite of sales. It's about figuring out how to make an idea someone else's idea, like the idea of inception a little bit. And there's a lot of great kind of just ways to make it a win-win for people and everything else. So that's it.
You kind of reminded me of the book Never Split the Difference.
Yeah.
It's like kind of help with the negotiating tactics.
Yeah, exactly.
Man, all right, yeah, we gotta have like a book section maybe.
Yeah.
Final fourth. Well, the fourth question is, what is your favorite dish to make?
What, like food? What favorite dish to make?
Yeah.
Man, I am not a cook. This question is just picking at all my flaws. My favorite dish to make is probably something stupid and simple, like a burrito, a quesadilla, something along those lines. You know, it's nothing fancy.
Hey, I mean, it requires time, so you got it.
Yeah, I'll take like my California roots, you know, throw some chicken, some carne asada or something, and a tortilla, throw some cheese and guacamole on it. I'm good to go.
Nice. All right, so the very last question of the show, which is, where could people find out more about you?
Yeah, the if you can't remember BrandonBirkmeyer.com, because it's a hard name to spell, you could just go to Brands on Brands, type it in anywhere, podcast players, or just brandsonbrands.com, and that usually connects you to everything I've got out there. Yeah, that's the place.
All right. Well, Brandon, thank you so much for coming on the show, sharing your wisdom, and making sure that people find a purpose. I'm going to try this. It's like a little tongue twister. A purposeful places to participate in their lives. And that would actually, it seemed like, to me, that's my biggest takeaway from this whole episode. And that being purposeful in your choosing of what you want in your life, and to continue on to strive to invest in yourself and not give up on yourself. So I just want to leave that with you all today. Hopefully you got something out of it. If you enjoyed Brandon and you want to see him back on the show, leave a comment in Spotify for this particular episode. If you're watching this on YouTube, definitely leave a comment, like, share, subscribe. All right, everybody. Be out. Peace.